Persona 5 is one of the most iconic JRPGs of all time, and today I'm going to be making custom magic cards based on some of the game's most iconic characters. My goal for each card design is to make a card based on each character's unique abilities. The first character I decided to design a card for was Ann. From doing Ann's Confidant, she gets the ability Crocodile Tears. In Persona 5, this makes it so when you're negotiating with shadows, they will ask you for less money or less items or whatever they're asking for in the negotiation. In Magic the Gathering, there's no real form of negotiation other than like Commander, so I came up with another interesting way to represent it. I came up with, if an effect causes you to pay life or discard cards, you'll lose half that much life or discard half that many cards instead, rounded up. In Magic, there are certain effects that require you to discard cards or pay life, so having Ann reduce the cost of these style of effects, just like how you're reducing what you need to pay in the negotiation. I also think this effect is super fun to build around. If you combined her with stuff like Cathartic Reunion or Defiler of Fate, you can make some super fun commander deck from her. Along with Crocodile Tears, I also wanted to implement another aspect of her in-game kit on her magic card. Ann gets access to the skill Fire Amp, which increases the power of all your fire-based spells. In Magic, I portray this by giving her Fire Amp. Whenever you cast a red instant or sorcery, deal 1 damage to each opponent. I think this does a great job at representing Fire Amp, since red is obviously the color of fire in Magic the Gathering, and being able to do extra damage off of your red instant sorceries seems like a great bonus, and those are also obviously the closest thing that I can think of that would represent the fire skills that we see in Persona 5. I also think this effect is pretty powerful when you combine her with effects like Torbrand, Thane of Redfell, or Jaya, Venerated Fire Mage. The next character I decided to design a card around was Mishima. Mishima is an interesting character, serving as this kind of outside helper to the Phantom Thieves who runs their websites and helps generally support them in stuff that isn't actually fighting. Mishima's Confidant ability is incredibly powerful, making it so your backup party members are able to earn experience even when they aren't in combat. For his magic design, I really wanted to lean into this idea and make his card focus on giving uniform advantage to all players in the game, since in Magic there aren't really teammates unless you're playing something like Two-Headed Giant. I came up with the following ability. Whenever a player would draw a card except for the first card they would draw in each of their draw steps, each of that player's opponents also draws a card. So essentially the idea being that your card draw is the experience that you gain and that all of your party members are the people in the game. I think the card design is generally pretty simple, but I think it lends itself to a lot of really fun potential use cases. You could lean into a group hug style strategy by running effects like Kami the Crescent Moon or Quain. Or you could be really mean with him and combine him with a bunch of one-sided draw punishers like Plagiarize or Shieldred the Apocalypse. Next, I decided to make a card for everybody's favorite coffee expert, Sojiro. Sojiro's Confidant ability allows you to make curry and coffee, which are both consumable items that are used to regenerate SP, and SP is used to cast spells from your persona. So it's easily translatable to Magic with the idea of mana and lands. So I came up with the following design for Sojiro. Coffee Master. Whenever you sacrifice a food token, you may untap up to 1 target land you control. The idea being that you sacrificing a food is eating that curry or coffee that you made from him, and untapping a land is the SP that you get from using that item. This card is pretty simple but super powerful. If you combine it with effects like Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx, or Gaia's Cradle, you can make a ton of mana just off of 1 land. Or he slots in pretty well as a value piece in any kind of food deck like Cat Oven Combo or a commander deck like Samwise Gamgee. I also decided to make a card around Kawakami, who is one of the most powerful Confidant abilities in the game, since all of her abilities are built around giving you extra time slots, which is an incredibly precious resource in Persona 5. One of those abilities is asking her to actually make the curry and coffee for you so that you're not wasting a time slot making it yourself. I decided to represent this with her first ability, Super Housekeeping, where you can pay a green and tap her to create a food token. In Persona 5, one of the ways that you actually use your time slots is going into the metaverse to complete story dungeons or explore mementos. However, one of the big downsides of doing this is that it consumes both your day and night time slots. However, once you get Kawakami's final Confidant ability, Special Massage, it actually helps mitigate this downside greatly, by allowing you to get a massage from her in order to get your nighttime time slot back. whenever you use her ability. In Magic, I thought the best way to represent this would be untapping your permanents, the idea being that you're being refreshed for your next time slot. So I gave her the ability Special Massage. At the beginning of your end step, untap all permanents you control. Initially, I was thinking about having this ability work with the day-night mechanic that was introduced in Innistrad. However, it felt really clunky when I was trying to make it, so I thought a better way to represent night would be to utilize the end step. Next, I decided to go back to the party members and make a card around everybody's favorite starving artist, Yusuke. One of Yusuke's confidant abilities is built around the skill card mechanic in Persona 5. In Persona 5, there is a skill card mechanic where you can have different spells or abilities assigned to these skill cards, but you can also get blank cards, which don't have anything on them. But if you have a blank card, then you can use Yusuke's ability to make a copy of an existing skill card, which can then be used on your personas to teach them powerful skills and abilities. In Magic, I immediately thought that I could easily represent this by giving him a fork style effect. However, I still wanted to make sure that I represent the cost of a blank skill card in his design. So I came up with Live Painting, which is the name of the ability in game. You pay a red, tap, and discard a card to copy target instant or sorcery you control, and you can choose new targets for the copy, and you can activate this ability only once each turn. The idea is that the cost of discarding a card represents the blank card that you're using to copy the skill card in game. Back to non-party members, I decided to build a card around Yoshida. In Persona 5, Yoshida is a political candidate that teaches you about public speaking and negotiations, which gives you more options that you can use in the shadow negotiations. One of the first abilities that you get from his confidant is Diplomacy, which in Persona 5 gives you more money or items when you're trying to extort shadows for them. In Magic, I wanted to represent this and lean into the fact that he's a political candidate a little bit more. So I decided to call back to the voting mechanic that we saw in Conspiracy, with whenever you cast a spell that requires an opponent to vote, you draw a card. The idea being that you're getting more value out of this voting negotiation idea. One of Yoshida's later abilities is called Mind Control, which allows you to skip the negotiation process for collecting personas entirely. In Magic, I thought the best way to represent this would be by having it so you can control the votes of other players. So I gave him the ability, whenever you cast a spell that requires an opponent to vote, you may pay a blue and a white. And if you do, you can choose how each player votes this turn. Obviously, if you wanted to build around him, he works incredibly well in a voting tech, especially when combined with effects like the Council's Judgment or the Plea for Power. Finally, to end this video, I decided to build a card around Futaba. Futaba is interesting because she doesn't directly fight, instead serving as a navigator for the Phantom Thieves. From doing her confidant, one of the abilities that she gets is called Active Support, which has the ability to randomly give your team a buff or recover some HP or SP. So I decided to represent this in Magic with the following ability. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you can choose one. Add 1 mana of any color, put a +1/+1 counter on another creature you control, or gain 3 life. The idea being that the random mana is the SP, the +1/+1 counter is the buff, and the 3 life is the health that she can regain you. I also want to note that she has 0 power since she doesn't actually do any fighting in Persona 5. Along with Active Support, another ability that Futaba gets from her confidant is called Emergency Shift, which brings in backup party members automatically after one of your current party members gets knocked down. In Magic, I wanted to represent this with a Death Render style effect, and I was able to come up with whenever a creature you control dies for an effect an opponent controls, you may pay 2 and a green. And if you do, you can put a target creature from your hand onto the battlefield. This makes Futaba an incredibly powerful defensive tool, since now whenever your opponents try to move one of your creatures, they always have the threat of you dropping something big like a Golta or a Blightsteel Colossus onto the battlefield. That concludes all the designs I made for this video, but if you also like Persona and Magic, you should check out this video where I made cards based on Persona 4.